Welcome back, everyone. We're starting this part of the conversation a little bit early as Jeremy and team get spun up to give their presentation. I wanted to see if there were any questions that anyone had before we started with regard to PD certificates or suggestions for ongoing conferences. You can just drop them in the chat and Megan and I will be happy to respond to them. Emma, this is for you. Polar seltzer water. So
Good job.
I know I have another board meeting after this. I know. So would love to hear from folks about how they're using some of these materials in this time, if any of you are using them currently, if you have best practices to share, and what kind of sort of follow-up you would like from this conference, because the energy in the chat is really amazing, and I would love to hear what you would all like us to do to keep this going. So I know that we're planning to post all the webinars. We're going to follow up with PD certificates for those of you who would like them. And we're certainly going to be parsing out the chat. I don't think we're going to post all of it in one doc. We may tie it to specific segments so that that's a little bit more manageable, because we've had quite an active role. I see Karen's also drinking Polar Seltzer. Love that. Let's see. Somebody's asking about the election edge because you already have a login. Okay, the way you log in is you use the email that you used to register for the conference, and then you put in election20 as your password, and that should allow you to get in. So you just go to electionedge.com, and that should take you right there to vote. Let me see how we're doing with the voting. I'm going to go in right now. Biden, we'll look at Biden's VP choice first. Kamala Harris has taken a more commanding lead. Amy Klobuchar is in second, followed by Elizabeth Warren, with Stacey Abrams in fourth. And let's see what else we have going. The ERA. This one has proven to be a little bit more divisive. So right now, pursue the 3-state strategy and challenge in court if necessary is in the lead, with submitted again for House and Senate approval. And a few of you think that it's not necessary, that women already have equal rights. Let's see, what else do we have? Go to the last one on federalism. And again, regional state coalitions is in the lead. So we seem to be doing pretty well there, with individual states coming in a close second. Not as much faith put in cities and counties to make those decisions on their own. So there we are with the current elections in pursuit. And we did get quite a bit of input on wanting to have a geography and a world history conference. I know Ed Metz and I were already chatting about that through email during the last little part of the conference to see what we can do to support making that happen. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Jeremy Riel, or as I was teasing him last night, the French pronunciation would be Riel. Jeremy is an educational technologist driven to study technologies and games for learning, and I love that passion expressed in his driven. He currently seeks team research efforts on GlobalEd, a multi-classroom blended learning curriculum and simulation game for middle schools. Operating from the University of Illinois at Chicago, Jeremy focuses his research and development on educational materials, on participation within digital spaces, questioning how participation can be tracked and measured to inform theories of learning. So Jeremy, next time I'm in Chicago visiting my oldest, I owe you coffee for doing this today. We're so excited to have you.
I'm still muted. Okay, yeah, when we finally get out of all this, I want all the coffee with everybody. This is
exactly
pretty nuts. Thank you so much for that introduction. I gotta do all this, share screen now. Figure out where my slides are. Should have it here now. and find the play button. Okay. I thank you everybody for allowing us to share a little bit about the GlobalEd project and this specific edition of GlobalEd that we're sharing with the education community in response to COVID-19 and school closures. I'm Jeremy Reel. I am the technologist and kind of game developer for GlobalEd, and I might be joined by our project director, Kimberly Lawless. She's dean at Penn State College of Education, and we both work on, along with our team, developing various editions of GlobalEd for everybody. So a brief history, we have over a decade in R&D on GlobalEd. So GlobalEd is a family of online simulation games for social studies that integrates science, writing, and other disciplines to kind of show the bridges between social studies and everything else. You know, social studies is not an isolated discipline, as you know, and it's related to everything else that kids are studying in school. So we want to kind of illustrate that through simulations of international negotiations. GlobalEd has had multiple versions over the years. To date, we've been in over 300 classrooms with thousands of students in various types of GlobalEd. Our main game is one that is a multi-classroom. We host up to 20 classrooms simultaneously as they debate with each other, and it's really cool. But in terms of COVID response, we have been working around the clock to develop a quickly scalable version of GlobalEd that you could use in your classroom tomorrow if you wanted. And we're calling this the GlobalEd Community Edition. And this is hot off the presses. This is available for download right now. A free, lightweight version of GlobalEd that can be implemented in a single classroom. We have developed a player's manual and a facilitator's guide, so teachers can pick the game right up and choose to play a game. It can be all done completely virtually. So our goal here was to leverage what we have learned from GlobalEd over the last decade or so, and to make a game that can be played with students as you're doing remote learning in your classrooms. All of our resources can be downloaded at this website here, sim.globaled2.com. You don't have to remember it. I'll put it back up on the screen later. And you can download our facilitator's guide, which has everything you need to know that I'm going to preview here. So GlobalEd, again, is a light version of our larger GlobalEd family of games. It's intended for single classes. It's shorter simulations than we typically run. Our larger GlobalEd game is about 10 to 14 weeks. This can be as short as a day, or it could be as long as a month, this GlobalEd CE version. And we needed to make a system that uses your existing classroom tech, so you could quickly use Google Classroom or other tools that you're using to play a GlobalEd game rather than a proprietary app. So the guide has as much information as we could provide on selecting technology that you're already using in your classroom to play a GlobalEd game. And we provide all the other resources to support that play. And what basically is happening in the game is asynchronous messaging between your students as they do negotiations, instant messaging during live conferencing if you choose to do that, and all that information on selecting those technologies is in this book. And like I said, you can play the game for a day, a week, 2 to 4 weeks. But as we have shown in our previous research, the longer you can play, the better it is for students to explore social studies concepts and the connections between the disciplines related to that. So, but regardless of the duration that you choose, every game is going to play the same way in terms of the sequence of the phases in the game. And so those 3 phases are the research phase, interactive phase, and debriefing phase, and they each come with their own activities, and that's all explained for you. So our whole goal with the CE version is something that you can pick up tomorrow, literally, and run with it if you wanted to play with your students. So in the game, students play specific roles. Each student will play as a diplomat in an international negotiation summit. And you'll be selecting a scenario. We provide a free scenario in this guide as well that you can pick up, play right out of the book. Students play as a diplomat. They're assigned a country in this negotiation, and they are given a problem to solve. This is a global problem, either happening in a region or we've done things like world food scarcity and food security. We've done things in the past like water security and access to fresh water. The scenario we're providing is about an oil spill in the Mediterranean. So that's fun, and it involves the Mediterranean region. But they get this problem and they have to solve it together. The teacher's role during this game is running the game, being the facilitator. And for people that are familiar with role-playing games, it's kind of serving as the game master or the dungeon master for Dungeons and Dragons. You're running the game. You're facilitating the simulation, making sure it stays flowing. You also serve as the moderator on any of the interactive components online. You monitor the activity, make sure there's no inappropriate content being posted. And then you also serve as the coach to students as they're working on research efforts and writing during this. Simulation starts with a problem statement. It's in the scenario. This is all provided in the book. It's grounded in real-world social issues as well as sound scientific practices. It's an issue that's affecting people right now, so you can also tie it to current events that are happening. Although the scenario may itself be fabricated like an oil spill happening in the Mediterranean, it's based on oil spills that have occurred recently. And that's the free scenario we provide in the book, and we're constantly publishing new scenarios too. So hope you join our mailing list and can keep an eye out for that. Students get the crisis, and all of the interactions are based on problem-based learning principles that have been well researched in the educational research field for decades now. And then they work together to collaborate on proposals and solve the game. So I've got a little fun little icon here of all the interactions between the countries, and the countries between scenarios are all different also. So if you pick up one scenario and want to pick up another one later, the countries are going to be different, the regions are going to be different, and the problem is going to be different. So as we publish more of these scenarios, you'll be able to pick and choose areas that you want to tie best with your curriculum in your classroom. So the three phases of global ed are the research phase, which happens first, then an online interactive phase where students will negotiate with each other and develop these proposals. And then at the end of the interactive phase, we hope that you will be able to host a debriefing conference with your students so they can reflect on their game and their gameplay and how the social studies issues that they encountered tie to real life. So during the research phase, students, they will research their assigned country. They get the problem statement and the scenario, and then we offer a bunch of starter resources to help students jumpstart their research from the immediate moment you assign them their country. They get the problem statement, they get what we call country policy briefs, which are these documents that are, they have prompts and immediate information about each country that students are assigned, and so they can just get started right away. We have a website where we provide all these services to and resources to your students as well as you. You can go to the website, your students can go to the website and download any of this information. So the problem statement also has a video version. There's PDFs of all the documents. There's additional information to help students get started on researching the problem and how it affects the country that they were assigned, so they can jump into the interactive phase and be able to start negotiating immediately. We also offer a bunch of vetted resource links about the scenario on this site on the research tab. And this is intended to help students jumpstart their research also by giving them some resources related to the problem, and they can review those. And we tried to have them be at grade level as best as possible for reading content. At the end of the research phase, students will develop an opening statement, which is kind of the main position of their country after they've done some research on how the problem affects their country and how it's affecting the global community. And so this opening statement, here's a sample here from an actual sim we did related to the oil spill from the Egyptian delegation. And the Egyptian delegation here outlines their position. They outline some of the solutions that they'd like to see. And then they offer some strategies for the broader negotiations to unfold and things that they hope to see. And then this sets the context. Every country will complete one of these opening statements, and it sets the context for the negotiations that will unfold and kind of encourages people to start negotiating with each other. So after all the opening statements are finished, students will start interacting in an online space of your choice. This is all we don't have a specific app for this for the CE version, but we offer in the guidebook a lot of suggestions and examples of how to use technology to do this during remote learning. But we will start the interactive phase after all the opening statements are done, and then students will start to send messages back and forth with each other as, playing as their assigned country. They're always in role play as their country. And this is essential during the process because it keeps the simulation framed well, and it keeps the interactions proceeding. Students are always staying in diplomatic roles. They're using diplomatic language, and they're trying to proceed forth with developing a proposal. This occurs via asynchronous messaging. It can occur throughout the day. It can occur at any time. Students can do it at home easily. Students can message privately between each other while they're negotiating, or they can message all of the people participating at once. So we suggest things like Google Classroom Streams or email, Google Docs. These are all things that students are already typically using in most classrooms around the country already. And we would love to share any ideas with you if you have any other questions about that too. But the Facilitator's Guidebook has a lot of sections on it on setting up technology. Here's an example from one of our sims from a messaging system we use, and it shows the different countries interacting with each other and sending messages back and forth on developing solutions to the oil spill simulation. This is a simulation we did in January in the Washington, D.C. area, and it was a lot of fun. Students did it in just a day. This was just a one-day sim, but like I said, it can be from as short as a day to as long as a month if you'd like. And then later on in the interactive phase, you can also do live conferences where you get everybody together at the same time and do some synchronous messaging back and forth to debate some of the issues. And we offer agenda items for performing these talks. We give you some questions and prompts to give the students, and you can give them to them ahead of time. They can prepare, and it allows students to debate this problem in real time. And then they can walk forth from this live conference with a little bit more energy and some new direction on how to continue with their negotiations. There's an example from, again, our January live conference that we did. We have a moderator when we play a multi-classroom simulation called SimCon. That's that gray area there, and SimCon is the moderator. You as the teacher would be the moderator in this case, and offering the agenda questions for debate. And then each of the countries will debate the agenda question. At the end of the interactive phase, students will all, as their countries, again, come back together, and each country will submit one final closing proposal that kind of synthesizes everything that was debated during the game, and then they'll submit this final proposal for voting. And then each country group will cast a ballot on which proposal they like the best. And there's a variety of criteria that can be used. And this is all based on your goals as a teacher. The GlobalEd game is super flexible in terms of what you're trying to achieve. But you can vote on proposals and then have a winner, and then even debate, what the best proposal consisted of and why it won and things like that. And that is a great thing to talk about in that debriefing conference about, how the game went, what the connections are between social studies concepts that were encountered during the game and real life. So there are multiple outcomes that we have seen playing GlobalEd over the last decade. Basically, one of the biggest things that we see is the interconnectedness between social studies concepts and science, writing, and many other disciplines. And it does so by giving concrete examples of real life. And this includes economics, public health, all these other social studies concepts that are frequently encountered but don't have a lot of connection between each other. GlobalEd offers the opportunity for real life connecting the dots, and that's really cool. To see it happen in a game and to have students talk about it months later. Again, also, you can use the game to understand how the content is grounded in context. Through a lot of writing that happens naturally through the game, students are learning argumentation and writing skills. It also boosts, giving students opportunities to take ownership of their play. It boosts their self-efficacy, motivation, and interest. These other items too, boosting their social scientific literacy skills, inquiry skills, and being able to transfer their learning to other contexts. These are all things we've observed in actual scientific studies of GlobalEd in classrooms. So we're hoping that this GlobalEd CE version that we have made for you, that you could take it and use it to achieve some of these benefits as well. But I don't want everybody to take our word for it completely. I've asked a couple guests to join us today too. We have, hopefully on the call here, Rick Coppola who's one of our veteran, longtime teachers who's taught global ed. And if he's on the call, I'd like to ask him to join us and share a little bit about what global ed has been like for him, how he's used it, what he really sees the benefits. Rick is a social studies teacher in Chicago Public Schools and is just awesome all around. So I'd like to hear what he has to say about global ed. If you're on the call, Rick.
Hi, can you hear me, Jeremy?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm going to circle back to a lot of things that Jeremy iterated to you all. I think first and foremost, we are always looking for ways to engage in cross-curricular collaboration with our content area colleagues, right? And so working in a social studies classroom, oftentimes looking for ways to be inventive with the science teacher and the writing teacher, not always as easily said as it is done. I think Global Ed provides that platform and that opportunity for us to really deepen students' argumentative writing skills in the context of a problem space that really brings in equal parts social studies content and scientific, knowledge. It requires a lot of scientific knowledge. It's also really a nice vehicle for students to engage in, small group collaboration with their peers. It reinforces research skills, so it provides a real nice outlet for me to think about how to navigate students in the process of teasing out reliable news versus news that is not reliable. Helps me think about the just right fit. We can find a lot of information on the internet that is factually correct, but if we're not able to access it, then it's irrelevant to us, right? So it helps me also make that distinction as well, not only just factual, reliable information, but information that's at their wheelhouse so that they can engage with the problem space. I found that it's brings a real sense of relevance, and it brings them a greater awareness of themselves in relation to a international perspective. And I think that's really hard to come by. I know in our district, geography is sort of relegated to the back burner in social studies classrooms. We're very much focused on history. So this is really an opportunity for them to situate themselves and understand their location in relation to a larger global perspective, as well as then grapple with something that is affecting the global community. So we've worked not only on this oil spill scenario, but the global water crisis. And I think both simulations we've also dealt with food insecurity. And I think that the variety of simulations, the topics that Global Ed puts forth have really been meaningful, right? For students to sort of talk about, to discuss. And I really like social studies as a venue to discuss inequity and how we might strive for like a fuller expression of a shared humanity, how we might reach toward and see ourselves as stewards promoting a greater sense of equity, particularly with communities that have been disenfranchised or de-invested in. And so I like to pan out and think about that from a more global perspective. And the wheelhouse that I'm working with is 7th grade, and I've done this with 8th graders as well. I've seen that's come up in the chat as what's the grade level. I think that the assignments are flexible in the sense that they can be scaled down to 6th grade and they can be scaled up as well. So I think that there's a lot of different entry points, right? And so there's different, in the curriculum, there's different ways that students can engage with the resources, like a read aloud, for example, can be one way, right? Or there's, investigating different websites and sort of determining whether or not those websites are reliable. And then of course there's activities and scaffolds related to the research process. And Jeremy described those fact sheets related to the different countries. And so there's tools that can provide a launching pad for students to sort of engage with and get into, access the curriculum. I think I'm going to stop there, Jeremy, because I also have yes too.
Yeah.
Two of my students, Isa and Pearson. Pearson, I'm gonna
Hi.
maybe ask you to start. Hi, and then just share with us, I don't know, some things that you thought were fun or exciting or surprising about your experience in Global Ed. Maybe pan the camera down a little bit more so we can see your face.
Okay, sorry.
Always a
Um,
teacher, sorry.
sorry, trying to adjust it. Okay, so I think one of the most as we got deeper into the experience and we kind of saw how like the whole thing was working, because there was different things like trying to gain connections with certain, I don't know, from like my perspective, trying to gain relationships with the different countries and trying to gain alliances. um it all came down to like how you presented yourself, because I mean, we even were like having discussions as a class and as groups on like who we wanted to make more alliances with. And I think it got fun. It was always fun. Like I had a really fun time during the entire experience. But like as we progressed, we were like assigning each other like jobs, I guess. Like so when we had our first conference, it was a fun experience, but we were kind of like navigating our way through it as it was going by. So the next conference we were ready. We had facts prepared before we joined. So in case we had a question to ask, we didn't really have to go like search it up. And then we had people do the like in our group do the research, and then we had people typing. We had people like reviewing what we wrote and like changing it a little. And then towards the end or after the water one, when we did the oil spill, our class worked like at first it was all of us working for Spain, and then for the oil spill it was all of us working in different countries. So it was really interesting to kind of I don't know, like flip the switch against like your own peers and kind of like I guess like I don't know, instead of like working with kind of I don't know. It was more challenging to work against peers and also work with people you couldn't see. You know, like I mean, it was a really fun experience. I would do it again if I could. It was really fun.
Yeah, so I just want to fill in some of the like colors, some of what Pearson said too. Like, you know, in some of the simulations that they were working on, they were the class group was broken up within the class, right? And so they didn't know who was playing who. For the larger simulation, they were working with other schools across different states, and they had no idea who these students were, where these students were from. So I think that's also a really interesting opportunity for students to sort of, you know, we always are talking about percentile ranks, right, and standardized test scores, things of this nature. But it's another thing when a student who's in 7th grade is engaging with other 7th graders across the nation, and they're starting to see how they put together their arguments, how they put together their research, and then they can locate themselves and where they're at and where they need to kind of maybe step up, and where they're actually doing a really nice job. Pearson, I appreciate the talk, the comments. I'm gonna move it over to Isa just for a little bit to share some of the things that you thought were noteworthy or interesting or fun, however you want to frame it.
I thought it was a super cool experience to do because we got to like find a way to solve like these super important problems that are actually in the world. And we got to do it as like a group. So like it was like a super memorable experience to do, I guess. And like, since you kind of had to have like more diplomacy during the work, it's definitely something I would remember. And yeah.
Can I ask you some questions like that were sort of interesting for me? So like prior to this experience, had you ever done anything like it in any of your classes like before?
No.
No, not really.
No.
And so when did you talk about the experience with your parents ever? Did you ever bring it up with your parents? Pearson, you're nodding. I see you nodding. So can you maybe share some of like those conversations that you were having and sort of what their opinions were about it?
At the time, since a lot of stuff was happening, like in the community, like when we had the strike and a lot of stuff, so a lot of the time where we were spending global ed, or a portion of it, was at home. So I would always tell my parents about, like, it was like a way of learning that I had never experienced, and it made it really fun to research. So I was explaining to my parents because I had thought like the stuff I was reading was stuff I had never heard about. So I was explaining to my parents. I always read like my the when I was submitting something, I'd always read it to my parents and ask on their opinion, how they thought of it. My parents, I loved it. Like I really, my parents were really involved with it. They liked it too.
Isa, any kind of thing that you want to sort of add to that, or anything else that you remember that you wanted to share?
Not really.
Okay. I want to talk about the conference, like, or preparing like the proposal. I know, Pearson, you were talking to that, like just building these alliances, but Isa, I'd like you to sort of talk about like the process of getting sponsorship for your proposals for countries, or just building that alliance, building those alliances, like in the need for diplomacy. You talked about the need for diplomacy. I thought that was interesting. Like, is there any way, maybe this is what I want to ask you, is there any way, or how did you take the learning from Global Ed and apply it to other learning that you had in the school year? Did you find that it was relevant? Anything you learned related to argumentation, social studies, science?
Yeah, I thought it could be related to argumentation because you had to use like evidence and facts to get other people to support your claims, and for them to support and to become, to like have an alliance. And so that was mostly argumentation because you had to convince them that they wanted to do. And like in a lot of our other classes, we also use argumentation. So this kind of also helped my skills of argumentation.
Jeremy, I think, yeah, I think
this is wonderful. Thank you both for showing up and helping us talk about Global Ed, and it was great hearing your guys' stories too, and your other classmates. I know Mr. Coppola has talked a lot about the whole class enjoying the Global Ed experience, and we are just happy that you all enjoyed it as well. So Rick, thank you so much for joining us, and Isa and Pearson, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with everybody about Global Ed and your experience with it. So that's all the talk that we have planned for Global Ed. If you have any questions, continue using the chat function. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, and I'll get to some of those if some are addressed at me. But the scenario website, where you can download the facilitator's guide and all of the other resources for this new Global Ed CE version that's intended to be used immediately in a single classroom, you can get that at sim.globaled2.com. And there's a tab on there for teachers, and we have a little email address capture thing where we'll send you a link, because we obviously don't want all the students downloading all the answers and rules and everything while you're playing. So we'll offer the facilitator's guide to you in an email link. Also about if you want a little bit more about the overall Global Ed project, you can check out our website at just www.globaled2.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me directly at jriel2@uic.edu. I'm going to open up this chat window and see what's going on.
Jeremy, I've been fielding some questions for you, so let me give you a little bit of an assist.
Oh,
a couple
excellent.
of folks have asked how well this is done with ESL, ELL students, and special education students.
I know that we've had multiple situations where classrooms are either heavily ELL or Rick, do you have any direct response on this from your experience personally? Because I know that we've been facilitating it, and we offer reading materials at different levels on the website. So we have the kind of more advanced government documents that the students like to use to support their arguments, but then we have more basic stuff that's also appropriate for use to support claims. But Rick, do you have any comments in your personal experience on ELL Assist?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like for diverse learners and ESL students, you know, I think that there was a lot of opportunities, right? So like with the diverse learners, we sort of would find roles that were the most amenable for the students. So like a lot of the students were really good, like during the synchronous portions, right, of communication, to sort of organize ideas, right? Because they were very focused on organizational stuff. And like just, you know, just needed to sort of fixate on that. So like that was a really nice role for them. A lot of times, you know, a lot of the content was very academic and very intense. And so we would find different resources, like Jeremy said, pull those in, streamline the content. For ELLs, you know, we sort of like looked at it from like a strengths perspective and sort of like looked at the country of their origin. And we're looking for ways in which they could inform us about the ways in which their country was experiencing one of these issues. So for example, the world water crisis, right? We have students that were Latino from Mexico. So we would talk to them about like what the experience is like with water in Mexico. And of course there was a lot to share there, right? And so I think there's different opportunities to sort of think creatively about ways to assist. I also was fortunate in the context where I work that I have a paraprofessional in the room, and I also have people that sort of push in. So my special ed teacher like works with me to collaborate, and so we just sort of, you know, are looking at what the scope and sequence is for the week, and then we think about ways in which we can give students, both ELL and the diverse learners, access to that content. And a lot of times, you know, the collaborative nature of the simulation and the you know, small group interest area work really allows for that. You know, like these conversations about like, look, everybody's going to bring their strength to the table. I think part of it is identifying what our strengths are, where we need some support, where we need help, and those are conversations that we would facilitate prior to working together. Right? Because part of the experience is working together and learning how to work together. And so I think that has to sort of be thought about as foundational, or like the infrastructure needed to support the work in global ed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I had anything to piggyback off that, it's exactly, you know, global ed is by design really flexible for you to be able to use it however you want. And in terms of differentiation of tasks, or as Rick said, catering to the strengths of your students, there are so many different roles and ways you can play that country in global ed. And at Pearson, you mentioned this also, that when you were playing during, say, like the live conferences or the messaging component, that there were different roles that your group took also. And so, Rick, exactly that. Your global ed has plenty of opportunities to address and play to the strengths of each of the students in the group.
I mean, just to add on to like really quick, like it's also really nice because there's a lot of students that, you know, are bored with your instruction, you know, on any given week or any given unit. They're not challenged, they're not stimulated. So like it really can be a situation where, you know, you identify them as leaders, right? And then they're a leader. And so Pearson took on a leadership role, right, during the simulation, during the conference time. And so it's a way for her to step up, develop her leadership skills. She was going to engage more, you know, because she was really interested, didn't want to hold her back. And then she can bring those things to the table. So I had people that during the simulation where I created this role where I would sort of disseminate the information to each of the leaders, and then the leaders would be responsible for communicating that back to their groups. So that was, you know, a way to build in a mechanism to develop these students and their capacities for leadership when, you know, the curriculum didn't mandate that, didn't require it, but it was definitely something that was very helpful to address that need.
Jeremy and Rick, I have one more question from the chat. Folks would like to know, what would you say in terms of the amount of time a teacher should be implementing this in a classroom during a day, a week? What would that look like?
Rick, I'll do what I've written in the book really quick, and then you can piggyback off of what I say. But in the facilitator's guide that we're providing everybody, it could be as little as 1 day for the sim, right? And we've written the guide, hopefully, and we're going to, of course, improve it with any feedback anybody has, but to be able to pick it up and run with it as you're playing. So not a ton of prep time required. We've seen teachers in kind of our longer sims play as few as 1 day a week, sometimes 1 day every other week. And then we've seen teachers playing every single day that they see their kids. And then, kind of infusing that with the curriculum. But it all depends on your goal, really, in terms of the amount of time that you want to play. Again, the longer you play, we've seen the greater benefits in terms of development of argumentation skills, development of socioscientific literacies, and things like that. But Rick, you've probably bounced around different time frames also, because you've been playing with us for so many years, and each year is different. Each class is different. So you can also play to the needs of the class.
Yeah, so I mean, what I liked about it is, I mean, again, the flexibility, I think, like, is double-edged, right? So you have to, when you say like, oh, I want something that's flexible, like GlobalEd really is flexible. So that flexibility comes with a certain amount of like creativity and how to sort of navigate the space. So 1 year at our school, we decided to do electives, right? And so the electives were an opportunity for students to pick and choose what they wanted to explore in greater detail. So that was a really great opportunity for me to have GlobalEd be my elective. I've done it where I've had to balance other curricular responsibilities. So it's been as little as like 1 to 2 days per week. It's been my focus for like 6 weeks, where I pretty much did it. We had like 75-minute blocks. I would do it for 40 minutes almost every day, and then 35 minutes of the core content. So I've played with it in different ways. I do think Jeremy is accurate that the more committed and consistent the routine can be, obviously the greater the benefit and the more investment comes from the students, right? And once they begin to participate and understand how to navigate this problem space, because there's some disequilibrium that comes, particularly for students who have not been apprenticed or who have been socialized into sort of school as, very teacher directed, right? And this is more teacher facilitated, this is more student led. So I think that there's some disequilibrium that has to be navigated and negotiated. And so it's about embracing that as an opportunity to learn and, put the intellectual responsibility onto the students and sort of really help redefine your role, what it means to support students and support their navigation. I don't know if the ladies would like to add to that briefly. Isa or Pearson. Pearson, do you want to add anything to that?
Honestly, I felt like, because we had a taste of each one. We had one that was about 6 weeks, like Mr. Coppola said. It was a while, and then we had another one that was for a couple days. I personally like the longer one because it makes the experience, I don't know, a lot more. I like adding on to Mr. Coppola and Mr. Jeremy. It makes it a lot more, I don't know, impactful. Yeah, a lot of the skills that you can learn develop over a period of time throughout the stimulation. So, I mean, I personally would suggest, or from my experience, I think the longer one is better. I mean, I think it's for me.
Cool. Thank you so much, Pearson and Isa. Did we have any other questions on Q? I've been trying to go through the chat, but I think we're close to the end time here too. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to email me, jrael2@uic.edu.
Jeremy, this is Tori. We had one question that came to me directly, and that is, do you or Rick have a suggestion about how teachers could adapt this to address COVID right now? And just thoughts about that.
I can tell you that we're working on a pandemic scenario because it's just too easy.
Too easy, right?
Yeah.
It writes itself.
I know. We're hoping to get that one out the door soon. So if you do download the facilitator's guide and enter your email address, we're hoping to be able to send you updates and new material when it comes out also, and let everybody know about that. But yes, the pandemic is a real, I mean, it's like, we should have already had it written, frankly. I mean, it's just way too easy. What's scary is we saw a thing from Carnegie Mellon, or it was Johns Hopkins University. I think it's Johns Hopkins, that they had done a simulation game on a coronavirus pandemic in October of 2019 with a bunch of industry leaders, very similar to GlobalEd in a way, but it was for industry leaders. So like hotel, airline, etc., all the same players that are being affected right now. And they played this out, and it was a coronavirus that originated in South America somehow. And I sent that to Kim when I saw that, and I thought, oh, okay, this is a little too close to home and a little too simulated. I mean, it is too accurate. So we'll try to do something where it makes sense, and we can find the analogs to it, but not be so close to home that it really makes your nerves shot.
Well, thank you all for a really wonderful presentation. It was wonderful to hear from your really talented students, Pierce and Isa. Thank you so much for participating in a conference. Make sure you add this to your CVs so that when you're grown-ups, you can say that you were speaking at a national conference in high school. Wonderful, wonderful work from you young ladies, and delighted to have Rick to be here to give the teacher's perspective, which is essential. And it's one of the things that we always strive to include in our design. If there are any other questions for Jeremy and Rick, we need to have them now. If not, we're going to shift to our next phase.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Pearson and Isa. Very, very appreciated to have you. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to have your opinions.
Excellent. So there are a couple of quick things before we move on. Our next presentation starts at 7 o'clock. Deanne Bell, the CEO of Future Engineers, is going to speak on global citizens in the making. I wanted to let you know that we are at almost 1,200 participants today, which is absolutely amazing and a credit to all of you. It's amazing to see a community like this come together and share best practices and be so passionate and engaged. So we will be doing quite a bit of follow-up after the conference, and we look forward to staying connected and figuring out how we can continue this important work together. So we'll be back together at 7 o'clock with Deanne Bell, and we will chat then. Bye.